Hey everyone, long time no see. Um, I think this is a bit crooked. Oh, hold on one second, let me fix that. Is that better? Okay, that's a bit better. Right, so long time no see. Okay, cut right to it. Godot made a statement about console ports that I think's a bad statement, and I think I might have provoked it. And I want to just sort of give my side and what my studio plans to do about it and stuff. Who am I? Hey, I'm Claire. I've worked in games for like over 15 years. I recently quit my corporate job, my brief stint outside of games, to start a VR game studio with my wife. So I have don't want to waste anyone's time. Top of the video. Disagree with the statement generally. I understand why. I disagree with it though. Thoughts on the sort of lines between W4 and the Foundation. I go through their reasons, and this is a big one. This is actually the main reason I want to put it out is I think there's some bad information out there. And then I want to explain my studio's plans and what I plan to do about it. So first of all, I have primarily in my career worked on in-house engines or custom tech. I have shipped from PlayStation 2 all the way through to PlayStation 5 stuff on those consoles. I mean, I suppose I technically never shipped PlayStation 5 game because Dreams was meant. I was the primary person on that. I don't want to get in trouble. And I worked obviously on the console, and I worked on the Pro, the PS4 Pro, and I worked on PSVR and PSVR 2. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I am not a render programmer primarily. I'm not an engine programmer primarily. I've done both jobs. I've had my hands deep in both, and I've done a lot of port work. So most of my career was spent at Sony, as in like that's the longest stint I did in the games industry in internal tech initially, and then I was at Media Molecule shipping Dreams. But I mostly worked at studios where we did port work, or we did third-party title work. And I've shipped on, other than PlayStation, I've shipped on the web, I've shipped on mobile, I've shipped on the 360, I've shipped on the DS, and I've shipped on the Wii. I think that's everything. Yeah, I think that's everything. I've worked with Unity and Unreal, both. Have I shipped a Unity game? I have been part of teams that have shipped Unity games. I've shipped Unreal games. Primarily, though, custom engines. So first of all, no villains in the story. Please do not be mean to anyone. I think everyone is acting in their best possible way. It's just friendly disagreements, but there's bad info, and I wanted to make sure that it's thing. Why do I think I kicked it off? First of all, W4's had made console announcements ages back. The Foundation statement's new, and that's kind of the worrying part for me. But yeah, I the last sort of month or two I quit. I've been setting up the studio, I've been running through paperwork, doing all this thing. Finally got my umpteenth DevNet account set up as a PlayStation partner, as sort of just part of the paperwork of the studio. And once I was behind the sort of NDA veil again, I just sort of said, "Hey, Godot port, what's the status? Or what's the dealio?" And I got into a friendly enough exchange with some employees, eventually with one, and also had a private chat with Remy. Private chat with Remy was very solid, very good. The public chat with one was amicable, but there was one statement that really stood out to me, and it basically was like, "Hey, this is how Unity and Unreal do it. What's the difference?" The difference is I'm making a bad short-term commercial decision shipping a Godot game. I just am. Because I believe in the future of my studio. I like building custom tech. I want to, I believe in the value of owning your house rather than renting it. If I want it, that model, I would be shipping on Unity and Unreal. Just flat out. I would be in a better position. And when I encourage game devs to look at shipping to Godot, the main reason is to sort of escape this cycle of renting your tech. 100%, that is the reason. And if you are engaging with a licensing agreement with W4 Games, I don't think that, I haven't seen the exact contract details, but from what I've discussed, I don't think it's a good plan, personally. I think if you're in the situation where you are in a situation where you're like trying to ship the game, you've got a Godot game, you've already invested in the ecosystem, and you just need to get a console port out. Hey, maybe it works for you. Maybe that's the right thing. Maybe you want to engage with a porting house, whatever. Your choice, your thing. But yeah, for me personally, it's about owning the tech, not renting the tech, and working on that. So let's sort of go through it. And I've written about like using Godot as the technical seed for your studio. I published an article recently about that on the website. I've written all of this, by the way, in article format in a bit more concise and clear way for those who want to read rather than listen. But I just wanted to talk to camera because I just wanted to be 100% clear in tone that there is no confusion emotionally where I'm at. And like, I just wanted to get across the studio because I'm a tiny indie now. I'm not working in a big corporate position. So I want to behave like an indie. So let's be professional. Let's be kind, everyone. So first of all, W4 is in a difficult position. They are the OG Godot studio. They deserve to make money. They have put a lot of work into console ports. It is totally valid for them to seek remuneration for that. However, they are in a difficult position because Godot, the engine, is run as a foundation now. That's fairly recent. That's in the last year. And then W4 Games is the commercial entity, and they're like still setting this up and getting all this figured out. The overlap between the foundation and W4 is inevitable. Primary contributors, the founders, just all the people, like basically the Venn diagram between those. And W4 should do whatever is best for W4. 100% makes sense. The foundation, however, it's going to get more scrutiny, and it should get more scrutiny because it's getting a lot of charitable donations and grants, and it's getting, support from people and free labor in the terms of, the open source community contributing and giving back. So it should be under more scrutiny. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to change policies. They're going to do things. Please be kind. I think pretty much everyone involved is, trying to do the right thing and trying to be good about it. But for example, there's a tricky problem, right? So like recently W4 got this huge investment from Meta to basically make Godot better on Quest. And, they posted an article about it. It's linked to my article. And honestly, that brings up an interesting conflict, right? Because if someone wants to talk to the Godot Foundation about something and that leads to business for W4 Games, is that a bad thing? I don't know. It depends where you sit. But there's definitely commercial opportunities that W4 Games may be presented because of their relationship with the foundation. It's just kind of where we're at. Was it the right idea for the foundation to give that work to, or Meta to give that work to W4 Games rather than, say, the foundation? Probably engaging with a commercial entity is easier. They would already have a framework for that, whereas engaging with the foundation would have required new things. But, was it the best thing for Godot that the foundation or W4 do it? Because hopefully long term, the foundation engages with more of that kind of stuff. I've seen, there is a long history of corporate entities engaging with open source entities. I am not an expert on any of that. I have mostly been involved on it from the corporate side. But for example, Adobe does a lot of stuff with Blender because that's where, or Substance rather, I should say, does a lot of stuff with Blender. And there's a Substance Painter plugin and stuff and da-da-da. So there's frameworks for that. Anyway, main thing I want to get onto is I want to get some information out there, and I just wanted to talk about what I was going to do and also the reasons given. This is the biggest one, the legal and open source argument, because they give three primary reasons: legal liability, disproportionate cost, and open source licensing issues. I want to sort of address the legal and the open source thing. First of all, for those of you who don't know your history, the games industry goes boom and bust a lot, but sort of the peak discovery miasma problem was in the 80s, and the sort of what we consider the modern console was established by Nintendo's gold seal of quality. And the whole point was it was by definition an exclusionary policy. It was like only the high quality stuff here. We're going to make sure that it's good stuff. And we're going to make sure that it's not like ripping anyone off. And so that comes with a bunch of legal and technical requirements from console developers. And Nintendo kind of set the standard, and pretty much every console manufacturer followed the standard. And over the years, those standards have loosened a bit, but that's kind of the basis from which these companies operate. And it's a good thing. It means that when a consumer is buying a console or a console game, in theory, there is a higher expectation of sort of quality and sort of ease of use and friendliness. What does this mean for you as a developer? Without going through NDA stuff, when you are submitting your game, there's like a whole bunch of forms and there's processes and there's tick box exercises, but you basically say, hey, these are the legal contracts I'm currently engaged in that are relevant to this title that I'm submitting through the content pipeline. These are the technologies that I'm currently using and their license agreements. And a big part of that is to ensure you own it and you have the legal right to use this code. So because you've got to remember that like Nintendo or PlayStation or Microsoft are the ones producing the physical media for you, and they don't want to produce pirated things in their factory, right? Because there's some potential exposure to liability there. So that's a big part of it. And you basically go through and you sign. And also some software is not compatible with consoles. For example, there is some software that is designed to be copyleft, where it's open source, and if you ever use it in your software sort of inherits that license. It's one of the reasons why game developers love the MIT license, because it doesn't sort of screw you like this. And one of the reasons I like why Godot is under the MIT license. But there are some licenses that are incompatible with PlayStation, and this is largely a checkbox exercise. It is still a legal contract, and I am not a lawyer, but having been through this process, it's mostly just sort of check your boxes, and you as the developer, by the letter of the contracts I've read, assume the responsibility. Could it be argued that engine or middleware provider assumes some responsibility? Potentially. I've never seen it argued in court. I'm unaware of any cases where the engine provider has been sort of held to account. Generally, the policy of the consoles is to hold the game developer into account, because the game developer is the one they've sort of got by their cojones, and they're like engaging with directly, and they're like, this is your game. You are ultimately responsible for this code. If this code leads to be the thing like Tony Hawk that cracks open a whole bunch of exploits or console stuff, you're responsible. But this does not mean that consoles are toxic to open source. In fact, it's completely the opposite. Pretty much every game that ships with open source code. STL, STB libraries are on so many game engines. IMGUI. So IMGUI started as the internal, everyone loves IMGUI, right? It started as the internal debugging framework inside a Media Molecule. It was written by Omar while he worked at Sony, and he was able to basically get permission from Sony to open source it and then continue working on it after he left. So that started inside of Sony, right? The Fire engine is an open source engine developed by PlayStation during the PS3 era to sort of encourage devs to do better. And it's been ported to a whole bunch of stuff, and that's all open source. PlayStation Studios, what used to be called Worldwide Studios, has a GitHub for some frameworks, like some tooling frameworks and stuff they've released open source. There has been a ton of open source contributions from console providers, and they encourage, like, it's totally fine to use open source stuff on console. Don't let anyone tell you different. This was the thing that really got my hackles up, because also, yes, there's an NDA around everything and it's security related, and it's not just security through obscurity, but it's also like if there was a reverse engineering or hacking project, and you can prove that they've sort of engaged with the actual SDKs or whatever, then there's like a legal noose you can get them on. There's a lot of reasons why the SDKs are private. I personally think that like the iOS or the MetaQuest SDKs, which again are locked licenses, you have to agree to certain agreements to use this code. But I think that's actually a lot better place to be at, because we can have more technical discussions in the open. And I argued at this point at PlayStation for many years. But hey, this is where we're at. This is kind of like the rules of the game as they've been set. But a long-established thing in all of these console communities is behind the NDA wall, there is usually a forum or a place for game developers to share code with each other. And there's sort of standards for this. And a lot of open source projects basically say, hey, we can't publish the console version online. We just can't for the public. But if you're behind this wall, we can give you a password, or we can give you a login, or we can give you a thing or a GitHub access to the secret repository, which has this stuff that we've both done the secret handshake for, and we can talk and we can collaborate and we can share this. So there's pretty well established sort of standards for that, and yeah, it exists. It's a thing. Have I personally looked into the legal stuff of doing it? No, but I am fairly confident on that one. And so confident I'm going to do something with my studio, but we'll get to that. The cost. Frankly, this one I have all the patience in the world for. Yes, it is an investment to pay people's salary to do this work. 100%. There is no reason why a studio should be forced or even made to feel bad about how they spend their money and their employees' time. There is no obligation to contribute back to Godot. Is it a good look? But people need to be paid. People need to, do things. And that should be totally fine. We should be totally okay with the studio saying, hey, I got Godot. I spent £1 million making Godot better. I'm not going to share it with you because I spent £1 million and I need to extract that £1 million out to basically keep doing this. That's a totally legitimate argument, and there's so many ways to monetize open source, and I don't think we should be overly judgmental about that. That's fine. As I say, it's mostly the relationship with the foundation and the foundation statement that's like, eh. The other thing I dislike here is, as I say, I've done a lot of ports. The language and communication I've seen internally, like on the forums and somewhat in public, is you shouldn't be doing the console ports. They're super scary. They're super hard. This is tons of work. And it feels kind of like boogeyman-y to me. Is it hard? Yeah, it's engine work. It's console porting. It's not as hard as you might think. So it kind of breaks down into sections. So first of all, the graphics part, which is the one that most people obsess over. Back in the day with porting, it was always the sort of time to triangle was a big part of the discussion. And, if you're talking about like porting from the 360 to the Wii, that was a big deal, right? Because you're going from like a shader pipeline to a fixed function pipeline, which is like before we had shaders. That was like a pain. And if you're going, so like when we ported some PS3 stuff to the Vita, that's a pain because it's a handheld. It's just way less performant. The PS3 port to the PS4 port was painful because that's 32-bit to 64-bit. And then you had to go from the cell architecture to a more standard sort of GPU architecture. And the 32-bit to 64-bit port generation, which was one of the last big porting generations, that was a big deal. That was a huge deal, because a lot of code that studios had just used for years broke. But for example, the internal renderers on most consoles are pretty similar to what is out in the wild. Like going from Vulkan to the PlayStation renderer is not that scary. If you're in DirectX, there's pretty well documented stuff. There's like a lot of support provided by the console manufacturers to write your own engines, right? There's a lot of docs, there's a lot of samples and text, and there's reference things, and you can do it. It is work. It is work, 100%. I do not want to diminish the work. There's things like the Godot shading language has to be made to compile or made to work with the console-specific shading language, right? That's a ton of work. But it is just work, and it is just a bit of a slog. It's just a slog. It's just a coal face you have to hit at. And to be honest, one of the nicest things about being a part of an open source community is we share the burden when it comes to the slog, right? The other part is there's like a lot of platform libraries. But now this is like where I get a bit of because like it's for things like leaderboards, achievements, network sessions. There's a lot of this, like it adds up, right, over time. A lot of this stuff's not natively in Godot, like you don't see the Steam leaderboard, for example, in Godot. However, turns out a lot of these private, SDKs, like the Steam library, or let's talk about Quest and MetaQuest and OpenXR, because that's kind of where I'm focused at the moment, because it's my lead platform. There is like a GitHub for the Godot vendors plugin stuff, where they've put all the sort of like, hey, this is the stuff that's not compatible with MIT license that we want to deal. It's over here. So there's kind of a precedent for that. There's also community ports of stuff. So like there's a community port of like the Oculus platform stuff. There's a community port, as they mentioned in their own announcement, about the Switch stuff. So hey, it's there. There has been precedent, basically, what I'm saying, for the Foundation being loosely engaged with projects around closed source SDKs and libraries. There's no reason why community activity can't produce these things. In fact, community activity is really good to produce these things. And one of my biggest concerns for the games industry as a whole is we're losing technical knowledge, right? Every cycle of consoles we've gone through, it was starkest from PS4 to PS5. When we were developing the PS5, I remember the conversations around the launch of the PS4. There was a lot of technical conversations. A lot of people were still maintaining their own in-house engines or renderers and going, hey, what about blah, 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 and what about blah, blah, blah. And when PS5 came around, everyone was like, yeah, we're on Unity, we're on Unreal. Meh. And it meant that the technical conversations were of a lower caliber and primarily dominated by very big studios. They're always going to be dominated by big studios to some extent, but there was fewer voices in the room. And I remember sort of like at the internal console developer conferences, there were fewer talks given from studios. And around the PS4 launch, there's so many talks given from studios where like, hey, this is how we ported our engine. These are our lessons learned. This is what we fucked up. This is what I think. Not all ports are equal, right? The thing is that like getting your game running on a console and just porting the tech needed for your game is a hell of a lot easier than making a one-button deploy commercial version of Godot. So there's a difference, and those two tasks should not be compared. Also, the other thing I want to say, just sort of out and out, is if you're shipping a game on console and you're expecting to get through all of the particular technical requirements of the console, all of the branding requirements, and you're expecting to sort of hit console quality, I don't care, unless you yourself are sort of entry-level engine programmer, at some point you're going to hire someone who is an engine programmer, maybe only a couple of months, maybe whatever, but you're going to bring in some talent that's needed to bring you over that line. It's the case. I unless you're doing like a point and click adventure or something, I just don't see most titles being like one click deploy. And I don't think it's right to sort of fool people. So I think it's harder to ship a console title with sort of this ready-made port than people might be led to believe. But I also think it's easier to do ports than how it's somewhat being portrayed. Again, biased because of my background and everything. I'm trying to keep this quick. I'm trying not to edit this because I am so busy and I've got a sick cat and it's life. My wife's book launch is also later this month and we're like head down on game stuff. So yeah, that brings me back to me and my studio plans. I'm 100% head down on studio work. We're currently working on a smaller title, and then the plan with the smaller title is to sort of push it through the pipe, the technical pipe, the sort of production, publishing, all the just sort of, there's like building a new studio. First game is just, it's up there, and we're blasting through that pipe at the moment, and it's a small game, but we are literally just sort of revving the engine and getting everything up to speed. Part of revving that engine is going to be making sure we're ready for console. We're a VR studio, so the only console I care about is PlayStation VR 2. I mean, technically the Quest is a console, and the Quest is our lead platform. But the PlayStation VR has noticeably a soft spot in my heart for good reason. I loved working on that thing. The controllers, man. The controllers. My baby. Good stuff. But I'm not going to engage with W4. I'm going to do my own port. It's going to suck. It's going to suck. It's only going to be built for what I need. I don't want to oversell it. I am a very tiny game dev studio, but I'm going to release it to the community, by which I mean the PlayStation developer community. Any work that I do that is not game specific, it's not going to come with any support. It's not going to come with any services. I don't want to do a porting studio. I don't want to do a middleware studio, but I want to share it. And if it's useful to you, yay! And if you do any work and you want to sort of throw it on the pile, yay! Because, I think this is better, because like Sony and Nvidia and Xbox and everyone, they have these like technical experts who actually go into studio and make the studio engines better for their console, so the console looks better. And it would really suck if those resources were being sent to one commercial game studio using Godot rather than, say, Godot generally, and I'd love like any expert time to be given to the broadest base and for more technical discussions around the console SDKs and Godot and how best to do Godot on particular consoles to happen, right? Because the honest truth is not everyone's going to agree, and there should be more education and it should be better. And I think we make it better. And I think it's a good commercial decision for my studio. And I think it's a good investment in the community for us to sort of share our work. And that's what I'm going to do. And again, no shade or shame on W4. I'm 100% chill with everything they're doing. And you should not harass them. No one should be mean. Everyone should be positive, chill. It's okay. Foundation, a little bit more scrutiny. But again, be kind. Be gentle. Everyone is human. But, Foundation gets held to a higher standard than a commercial entity because, yay, it's community. That's where I'm at. I'm stressed. I'm overworked. And sick cat and book launch. And we're going to do this stuff. Don't expect it soon. Do not expect it soon. I want to highlight that. And do whatever's right for you and your game and your company, because times are hard out there. We all need to pay bills. And if you need to do what you need to do, you do you. But that's me just talking to a mic for a while. There is an article. It's much more concise. It's much more friendly. It's got things in. Go read the article. You'll be better off I hope this helps someone. I really do. And I hope we get to a better place. That's all I'm asking. We get to a better place. Okay, I need to turn this thing off. I'm not editing this, by the way. I am way too busy to edit this. This is me rambling at a camera. If you've been listening to me rambling for camera, good on you. Or whatever. Go make games.